Eh,
Hey Brad, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I was having a weird microphone setting thing there for a second.
No, I
Um,
can hear you just clear.
how are things?
Things are good. Things are
Yeah.
good. Yeah, just
School
ready to
year's
get
off to a
going.
good start.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Just eager for the season to get going, and we're kind of in that point, that holding pattern now, where it's like, all right, it's time to go.
Yeah. That's great. Well, we'll jump right in. What year
Okay,
is this
great.
now for you at Kent?
I've been telling people it's the 13th, but that's as much a guess as anything. I think it's year 13, or this will be season 13, I think.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
before that, you were at Canterbury for a little while, right?
Correct. Yeah, it was 3 years at Canterbury as Patty's assistant.
Okay. And was that for you right out of Holy Cross, jumping into prep schools?
So I went and I played. I played a year and a half, a year and a part in the East Coast League, and then went back to Holy Cross and did like half of a year as a volunteer assistant coach,
Okay.
and then right to there. Yeah.
Got it. So how
So
did you end up? Because you went to private, you went to Del Barton, right, for
I
high
did.
school, but
Yeah.
not didn't go to
Yeah.
boarding. So
I
what
did
was
it.
your connection or familiarity to boarding school? Like, how did you get into
Yeah.
it initially?
Great question. To be honest, so I'll tell you a little bit about, I guess, my path. So went, as I said, played at Holy Cross, had a great experience there. Got a chance to play about for a year and a part out in the East Coast League for Ontario and Bakersfield when they were East Coast League teams. Um, Knew that when I was done, I wanted to get into coaching. So I jokingly will say like 2008 financial crisis actually ended my hockey career.
Right.
We saw some teams fold out in the East Coast League and some
Yep.
teams double affiliated with NHL teams, and so my spot got taken by a kid that had an NHL contract, and I was no longer I didn't really fit the
Yeah.
bill anymore. So that kind of ended my hockey career in kind of an untimely way for me. So I called Paul and just knew I wanted to get into coaching, wanted some advice, and he gave me the opportunity to come up and finish the year there as kind of a volunteer assistant, which was a great experience. Learned a ton. He's always been a really great mentor for me. And then at the end of the year, kind of had a conversation with him about like what direction to take this. I thought for sure I wanted to coach college hockey. That was the path in my brain.
Yep.
And he actually suggested looking in the boarding school world. He had started at Portsmouth Abbey
Right.
before his kind of whole journey. And, he said to me, he's like, if I were starting over, I probably never would have left the prep school world, which is
And then
just
he got
ironic
back into
because
it
he found back
afterwards.
he's found his way
Yep.
back into it. Um, so yeah, so it was really him that kind of gave me the idea. I was also happened. My brother went to Canterbury, so I knew
Oh,
some
okay.
people there. Patty happened to be looking for an assistant coach, so it was kind of perfect storm of um, me looking at that at the time when he was also happened to be looking for an assistant coach. My Patty had been the assistant coach when my brother was there as a student. Peter Levine was the head coach. So
Yeah. I grew up being a Connecticut guy. I grew up knowing Pete Levine from way back when he was
yeah,
coaching at Fairfield Prep.
yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
He's still, I would consider him a good friend, and certainly a mentor in the other parts of my role in the boarding school world. He was the dean of students when I was over at Canterbury, and I just finished 5 years as the dean of students here and taking on
Yeah.
a different student life role. So somebody that I've always felt really comfortable bouncing ideas off of, and have another Holy Cross guy too. So can't go wrong there.
So I joke sometimes you and I are I think roughly the same age or in that same call it era
Yeah,
anyways. We're like, I went to boarding school and then went and played Division I college hockey coming out of boarding school, which now is like, oh
sure.
my God, like right, like that's
Yeah,
ancient.
yeah,
You came right out of the New Jersey
yeah.
Pride, which I would venture a guess that you might be the last guy to have done that, right? To go from that level right to Division I college
That's a
hockey, or
good that's a good
there couldn't have
question.
been many others.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't I'm
Yeah,
not sure, but I'll tell you like it was a jump, big time jump for me like
yeah,
to even at that age, even at that point, which obviously I know it's changed a ton, but like I got it when I got into Holy Cross, the next youngest guy on the team was like 13 months older than me. And so that
right.
was a culture shock, but also like I had never played somewhere, and I don't mean this to come across arrogant. It's more about where I played than where I wasn't the best player. And so that
Right.
was a really tough transition for me to be like, oh, wait a second, like now I've got some ground to make up. So I was actually
Yeah.
like for the first bunch of games. Like I was a healthy scratch. I didn't make the trip for the team's first trip, went to Alabama Huntsville, and I remember I stayed behind and I talked to Paul afterwards and was just like, the standard like what do I got to do question, and
Right.
that can go in so many different directions, and I always think back to that conversation I had, and he said, Dale, you're going to be the best player in your class. You've just got a long ways to go to get there. And that was super motivating for me,
Yep.
that kind of piece of advice that he gave me. And listen, I was out of shape. I probably looked like I look now when I stepped into college trying to be a Division I athlete. And I was, young and had a ton to learn. So it was a really good learning experience for me to kind of face that adversity, and
Yep.
to also do it in an environment where, it's supportive, and Paul was motivating for me in that way. So
Yeah. So, um, so when you got, so we'll talk about hockey stuff too, but I'm so curious too. So
sure.
when you got to Canterbury initially, were you
Yeah.
teaching or always on the like, so did you start as a teacher and even at Kent teaching as well?
I did. So when I first started at Canberra, I was supposed to be an intern, and then
Okay.
they needed kind of a low level theology teacher, believe it or not,
Yeah.
which was not my background. I was an economic
Right.
major, some math background, but I had gone to Catholic high school, gone to a Catholic college. Canterbury's a Catholic school, so I actually taught some theology when I first got there for two
Awesome.
years, and then I taught some economics and a little bit of history. I worked in admissions, so I wore a ton of different hats while I was there. Got a lot of different experiences. And then when the job opened at Kent, I came here and I taught history for about, I don't know, I guess 7 years.
Okay.
And then I moved into the dean's office. I was assistant dean for 3 years, and then took on the dean of students job for 4 years or 5 years, and now I'm in a student facing role that we call dean of community life, which is kind of think of the proactive, strategic student life stuff, as opposed to the dean's office, which tends to at times be reactive, unfortunately. So got away from
Right.
that a little bit and more kind of hoping to be on the more positive side of the student life stuff.
I was gonna say, right? I think I admire people so much like that. That dean of students job is so challenging because like
It
it is
is.
critically important, but you're also dealing with, I say like I think all these kids who go to are great kids, but you're dealing with
Yeah,
great kids in their worst moments, right? Like
100%.
and like that is
And,
so
and so
tough.
many of the issues you deal with, you're doing a good job if nobody's happy, because you
Right.
have to find that happy medium, whether it's disputes between kids or whether it's, faculty members who don't agree with policy. It can at times be an overwhelmingly negative job. And so it definitely is a little bit of a burnout job. And I'm thankful that I got this opportunity to I learned so much. I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity in my career. But I was certainly ready to shift to something different too.
And when you got to Kent, right, you were head coach there right away, correct? So you
Correct. Yep.
followed Matt, was
Matt
it Matt
Herr.
Herr,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, right,
Yep.
because Matt, so I think, yeah, I was there. So I left Berkshire in 14. So, like, I remember your first 2 or 3 years there,
Yep.
um, coaching at Kent. And, like, to me, and correct me if, like, I'm wrong, like, I feel like the history of that Kent hockey program was, like, kind of always consistently good. And then I felt like when Matt got there, it kind of maybe jumped into what we would now call like top or
Sure.
upper echelon of prep programs. And then I think for, obviously I think about and I know for the families that I talk to, like Kent being now in that kind of, we could debate how we would ever classify what that tight, like that top group of programs would be, but
Sure.
sort of now like firmly entrenched in that group. Is that
Yeah.
is that
Yeah,
about
it's you're
right of
pretty
my
I
memory
think
of
you're
it?
pretty close. I think the 80s Kent was the top of the heap. I'll tell you a quick
Okay.
story.
Yep.
Um the Brian Leach was being interviewed when he was post career with the Rangers, and he's like a dual interview. I think it's him and David Quinn being interviewed, and I think the question comes up about Avon, like how did you end up at Avon? And he said honestly, he's like I went to visit Kent, and David Quinn was there, and David toured me around, and I got to know the team a little bit. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna be good enough to play here, so I went to Avon.
Yeah.
So I love that anecdote, obviously, because
Yeah.
Avon, the strength of their program. But so the '80s, between him and Jack Capuano and Billy Jaffe and some really high end players that played at Kent in the '80s. It took a bit of a dip in the '90s, so hockey
Right.
program was not very strong in the '90s, and then Matt came in and really revived the program, and I think he was here for about 10 years. And I was very fortunate. The team that I stepped into when Matt stepped away was fantastic.
Right. I
And
remember that team.
yeah, but it
Yeah.
was also, so I was very fortunate. My first year it was kind of easy to step in and just let the horses run. But I also graduated, I think, 13 players that year. So
Yep.
now I'm trying to build a team with very little reputation, personally, and still trying to kind of figure that out. So, I'd say we got to a point where initially, like we probably went 3 or 4 years where we were right around 500, and we had to build it back. And so, I feel like we certainly take great pride in the fact that we were able to kind of get it back to that standard that I feel like we're at, where we can kind of match some of those that previous history.
Yeah, and when I think about, and I obviously we've talked about a lot of kids in the last couple of years with
Yeah,
my role, but like I'm going to say this, and like I want to make sure I'm saying like this is what I think is kind of the highest compliment I can pay, right? Like when I think about the hockey players that like when I was coaching against Kent, but even now, like when I see your program, I think one of the
yeah,
things that I think is in some ways maybe a little bit unique about when I think about Kent's program compared to those other like top tier programs is like I'm always, yeah, I've always admired the fact that I think you guys get really good hockey players when they come there who become great hockey players when they
sure.
graduate, right? And I think there are some programs that are fortunate in that they're getting great players who are
Yeah,
great players when they're coming in. To me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like I always think about Kent of like, hey, they're going to get a lot of good guys who
yeah,
are going to be much better hockey players than maybe some people thought they were by the time they
sure.
graduate.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think it's interesting because if you ask me, like, I would agree with exactly what you said, except for I thought last year we had a team that brought in, some talent that maybe in a way that we hadn't in the past yielded, and then I felt like
Yep.
we underperformed. So,
Yeah.
and so, thankfully, I think we have a lot of those guys back. I think there was just really high expectations, and it's hard to transition to this style of game and this league and the
Right.
grind that it can be mentally and physically, even though people are used to playing longer seasons. It's just not with the same level of intensity and the same level of elevated energy that comes every single night in our prep games that I love. But to your point, yeah, I mean, I think that's what we pride ourselves in. When people ask me about, as I said, when I started, I thought for sure my path is college hockey. That's what I want to coach. But the part that I fell in love with, and that has kind of been the thing that's kept me in the prep school world, is that we can focus on the process. Like I joke
Yep.
around and say, like, we could go 0-30 and I'm not going to lose my job as a hockey coach.
Right.
I would never, that would drive me insane. It would never
Right.
happen. But it's freeing to know that we can actually spend our time focusing on helping our players get better and to reach their individual goals within what we're trying to create as a team framework too. So we design our program around that. Like our practices, we're not putting in super intricate systems and 1,000 face-off plays. And like we keep things relatively simple so that our guys can master a basic structure, give them some direction, but then we can spend way more time focused on their development as an individual player, as opposed to, again, trying to find ways to eke out an additional goal over the course of a season, which may lead to one extra win. I'd much rather spend time helping guys get better and try to reach their individual goals too.
Yeah. Well, and obviously, I think for everyone, right, one of the big shifts in this development model now for prep hockey from when I was playing, starting coaching, but even from when you started coaching now,
Yeah,
is like the what the fall hockey component
sure.
looks like, right? Which is
Yeah.
now so different and a great opportunity. And so for you guys, like I
Yeah.
know that's evolved over the last couple of years too.
Yeah.
I always felt like you guys were at the I remember when I was coaching at Berkshire, hearing like, hey, they're doing some interesting things like around developing players in the fall. That was,
Yeah.
the rules were different now, but like, what's your
Yeah.
setup now for your guys in the fall?
Yeah, I think it's actually it's as good as it could possibly be within the restrictions that we have from a league perspective.
Right.
Our kids have great access to our ice. They have the ability to get on it 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We don't really, we offer it in maybe a less structured way on the weekends for kids more to just go out and have fun and mess around. But a lot of our kids are off on the weekends playing games, so it's a little bit less of that. But there's a time block. It's usually about an hour. Some days it's an hour and a half in the evening. And 3 of those days we bring skills coaches through. We've been really fortunate to work with some awesome people. This year we're working with Booney Eves, who's an alum who played for the Rangers and he runs top line hockey. He comes up one day a week and works with our guys. And then
Yep.
IPH, who's obviously really well respected in our area, comes does a day. And we have Chris Gragnano come through too, who works with the Mid Fairfield Midget program and then
Right.
as obviously an assistant skills coach with the New Jersey Devils. So we're really fortunate to be able to kind of tap into some of those resources. So those guys will come 3 days a week, and then our one day our goalie coach comes through. So we work with Bobby Leeser, who's awesome. He had been the goalie coach at West Point for a long time, and then he runs his Sentinel goalie consulting group. So he comes and works with our goalies one day, and we just have one day that's like a competition day where they'll play small games or full ice. So they get kind of a little bit of a variety, but with some intentional focus. And then, on the weekends, we have a little bit of a hybrid of what's going on right now. We probably have 6 or 7 guys who are playing with Yale between their 16s and their 18s. A bunch of, most of our 16s kids decided to stay play birth year. But then we
Yep.
also have a team through Nor'easter that is made up of pretty much that team is made up of all Kent kids, and it's pretty much like 85% of our varsity roster. So this is the first year we're doing that.
Yep.
I think it's been well received by the kids that are doing it. Logistically, it's great. I think they've been competitive. I think they love the chemistry they're building. We've also been fortunate enough to have some pretty well-equipped parents to coach that team. So we've
Yep.
got like 4 or 5 parents who are Division I college hockey players. A couple of them have been NHL draft picks. So we've been we have some talented people that can coach that group too, which I think will help in the long run. And that's kind of they decided to do that. It wasn't necessarily me pushing that. I'm of the mindset like I want them to do what's right for them and their family in the fall. But I do think that's been well received by the kids that are doing it. So we've kind of left that open to do whichever makes the most sense for you and your family, and then give our advice where we feel like it's relevant.
Yeah, you mentioned Boone Nieves. I was telling someone a story the
Yeah.
other day. Like when I was coaching at Berkshire, I saw Boone Nieves play in the Eagle Brook tournament. It was the only time I'd ever seen like an eighth grader, and I remember sitting there with Dan Driscoll and going like that kid's a pro. Like flat out being like, wow, that guy is a pro. And I remember
Yeah.
coaching against him when he was at Kent and just being like, I don't know we
Yeah.
have no way to stop. We have no answer for whatever he's
I
doing out there.
I think that team, when I was at Canterbury, we played them, and I think they beat us like 13-2.
Yes.
And it was the Boo show, but there were some other pretty darn good players on the team too. But he's honestly though just one of the best people. Like he's just such a really down to earth, awesome guy. I'm so happy for him that his company's been really successful. They do a great job. Him and his partner Justin Selman, who we played with at Michigan, just super passionate about what they do, and they genuinely I think care about the kids in a way that sometimes I feel like the business of hockey has gotten away from.
Yep.
I feel like when you have that, people see it and they're able to pick up on it. And Boo and Justin definitely have that. So just I'm super happy for him, and he's the perfect example of like a prep school kid.
I was
Like
just gonna say that. Yeah.
he majored in music at Michigan. Like he's just a kid that has well-rounded. He had the opportunity to leave here as a guy that would have been, and expected to be an NHL draft pick during his senior year, and he decided to come back, and he just loves his experience. And I talk to him about it all the time. He's like, I wouldn't change that. Like he offers all the time. He's like, if you ever have kids that are thinking about what to do, whether it's leave early or stay, he's like, just send them my way. He's like, I'm glad to talk to them about my process and how it worked out for me and what it meant to me too. So
Yeah, and I think obviously such a huge asset for the kids in your program because I think when you have someone like him around, um, I think the recognition of like, oh wow, this is attainable,
yeah,
right? Like
sure.
here's a guy who like, hey, if I come here and I work hard and I do well in school, there's going to be opportunities for me to go to places like Michigan, and then obviously if that goes well, but I think it sort of yeah creates this level of and I say that to like when I'm talking with the parents or the kids when I'm starting this process, right? I tell them all the time, like, look, I'm a guy who's going to say, like, our goal is to help you find the right fit academically, socially, and athletically. Because I believe, like,
Yeah.
if you find that, no reason that, like, I know your goal is to play college hockey and play in the NHL. And
Yep.
there's guys in this league who've done it. So, like,
Absolutely.
if we can find the right place for you, I think those are attainable goals for kids. And like, yeah,
Absolutely.
I think having someone like Boo to be able to say like, hey, it is real,
Yeah.
and he's really done it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure, for sure. And obviously, like we currently have like Noel Achari and
yeah,
Alex Ferrier both playing, and I was fortunate to get to coach Alex, and but they both, same idea. Like it's the same message we give kids all the time. It's like you can achieve all of these goals here, and it's not. I always say like I never feel like kids that a kid that has left us or decided to stay for that last year has left and has been overcooked. Like Gio DeJulian, who was with us a couple of years ago, he was on a central scouting list and ended up getting drafted, but like he came back for his senior year, had a great year, and then he stepped in the USHL and was dominant his first year, as
right.
opposed to like trying to find his way. He was able to
Yep.
step in, be impact. Same thing, Teddy Mulgrave, who's at St. Lawrence now, like came back for his senior year. I think it was hugely beneficial for him to play some roles that maybe he hadn't played traditionally in his career. And so when he stepped in, he had a great year in the USHL last year, and then St. Lawrence accelerated him. So he went in this year, I think, largely because he had, taken the path that was like, I don't have to, wade in the wings. I can continue to develop and take on an important role right away.
Yeah. So one of the other things I've talked to a lot of coaches about, and part of this is like what I'm seeing, right, is like, are you starting to get a sense, and we can talk about all of the changes that have gone on, I think
Yeah,
like what it means now when a kid's graduating, what that route's going to look like.
sure.
Part of, I guess, what I'm doing, and also I'm curious to see if you started to see this, I feel like what I've seen in the last couple of years now is um, my clients, and I'm curious about your team, like
Yeah.
starting to get younger, right?
Yep.
Like I'm
Yep.
starting to see more, and I'm starting to see more guys who are like ninth graders or maybe reclassified ninth graders who want to go and play 4 years of prep, 4 years of varsity
Hmm.
prep hockey, and then have more flexibility on the back end around
Yep.
whatever they're going to do, versus I think the days of like, well, hey, we're going to bring in just four to six, 16 or 17-year-old repeat
Yeah.
juniors. To me, it feels like it is starting to shift that way. Are you seeing it at all yet?
Yeah, I do. I agree. I do think we're going to shift a little bit younger. For us, I wouldn't say it's happened practically yet, but I think
Right.
theoretically that's the direction we're going to probably head is a little bit younger. I do think we'll see less kids reclassify. I actually
Mhm.
still think it's a fantastic option, and I think
So do I.
some of the kids that have had the most success with us in recent years are kids that have reclassified, and I think there's some huge benefits to it, and we could probably talk on that for an hour. But I do agree with your perspective that we're going to see us get a little bit younger this year in particular, and we have a pretty big turnover this year. Like we're graduating 12 or 13 guys, depending on how the whole roster shakes out. Which in a given year we're usually more like 8 or 9. So,
Yeah.
but we are, I think, pretty intentionally looking at some younger kids. And I think some of that is the things that you would expect. Like I think with CHL opening up, there's more opportunities for kids on the back end in terms of the junior side of things, maybe less on the college side of things. But the junior side of things, there's more options available. And like I see kids playing in the USHL this year that I don't think 2 years ago I would have ever expected to make a
Right.
USHL roster. And so, what does that mean? I think that means a lot of different things. But one of the things it means is that we would more likely be recruiting against USHL teams for say a 17-year-old than we would have a
Right.
couple of years ago. And so I do see us shifting a little bit younger. I think that I continue to like stand by, and I think you would agree with this too. Like, come to prep school and graduate. Like, don't
Yeah.
I'd rather you not reclassify and glad graduate than reclassify and not graduate. So I do, yeah, I agree. I think we'll see our league get a little bit younger.
Right. Well, and I often talk to families about that too at places like Kent, and we'll talk about that too, right? Where it is going to be a selective admission process, right?
Hmm.
And really understanding that, like, you know, obviously there's always going to be more opportunities if you're applying as a ninth or a 10th grader, just from a pure
Sure.
admission standpoint.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I think I am starting to see some of, you know, I've been beating that drum out in the hockey world for years, right? Of
Yeah.
telling parents like, hey, I get the idea that you're saying like, well, we want to wait until he's an 11th grader to make sure he's stepping in, getting the best amount possible, hockey
Sure.
opportunities. And I'm like, I definitely understand that. I'm telling you though, it's going to be significantly harder for him to get admitted as an
Yep.
11th grader than if
Yep.
we're willing to do it. And that's why for me, I go back in some ways to that original point I talked about, like where I think about Kent's program around like
Yeah.
having the ability to develop kids while
Yeah.
they're there, as opposed to more of like we're bringing in, you know, as finished a product anyways as a
Sure.
17-year-old is going to be,
Yep.
right? An older kid who we're ready to jump right in and play.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I think, the more time I get to work with them, the more I feel like we can add value to them and help them grow. I mean, that's kind of been, as I said, I think our kids that we've seen the most success with have been some of our guys that have reclassified, but largely a lot of our 10th graders. Like if you look at the guys who have left here with the most success over recent years in terms of college commitments and opportunities that come after Kent, it's largely been kids who have been with us for 3 years.
Yep.
Now, you could look at the flip side of that and say, well, they were able to be with you for 3 years because they were good enough at a younger age to be able to compete. But I like to think that we're certainly having more ability to add value to them also.
Yeah. No, I agree. And well, I'll say this. I think one of the other really, like, I don't know how many kids I've had come through the admissions process in the last couple of years, a
Yeah.
ton. And I think one of the things that has made I hear a lot, and I've honestly believed about Kent, is from a school standpoint, I have a lot of kids who I think kind of fall into two categories, right? Like I've got this group of kids that after visiting some schools are going to be really attracted and drawn to what like we would call that medium-sized school, call it like the
Hmm.
350,
Sure.
400 size. And then I've got some kids who are going to go and see the bigger schools and want that. And Kent
Yeah.
is one of those places that to me becomes is one of the few places, honestly, that's attractive to kids who want opportunities potentially in maybe both of that, right? Like
Yeah.
that small school field, but
Yeah.
the campus size and programming and some of the offerings that the larger
Yeah.
schools offer.
100%. And Brad, you could work in the admissions office for me, and because that no, it's one of the things I talk about actually is I love the size of our school. We're 525. We are, and you described it kind of the way that I would talk about it also. Like I feel like we're big enough that anything you're passionate about, anything you have an interest in, like we have the resources to support, whether that's financial resources, human resources. We don't have to say no that often. We're also small enough that I walk around campus and I know everybody. And so I love that element of it. And that was important to me. I went to a small high school, I went to a small college. Like I really appreciated that environment and the community that creates. There's other elements to that too. Like we're like 92% boarding, which I really appreciate.
Hmm.
I just makes it feels like there's more cohesiveness, more continuity in the community aspect of things. Everyone's kind of on the same schedule. Even our small day student population, I bet if you talk to some of our faculty, they wouldn't even recognize that some of those kids were day students because they
Right.
spend so much time here that it's almost like they're boarding students. So I would really like those two elements a lot in terms of the community that we're able to create. Being that kind of what I call mid-sized large school.
Yeah. And I think I'm always, the campus too is, and I toured it again very recently. Like, I think when you pull up to it, it like looks like what a prep school campus looks like in a movie,
Sure.
right? And then I feel like you guys have done a really unbelievable job of like in your academic facilities and things of like you walk into a building that then all of a sudden feels really modern, right? Like so
Sure.
it's this it is like it's I think it's a beautiful campus and obviously like the location is
Yeah.
ideal, but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough campus to beat.
Yeah, I love and I love like our connection with the town is awesome. It's a small kind of New England town, has like 4 or 5 restaurants and a grocery store, but our kids treat it like it's part of campus. Like we have a ton of flexibility for our kids to be able to get in there and access that, which I think is awesome. It gets you outside of the prep school bubble a little bit and
Right.
attached to the real world. But also when we talk about our motto and our goals, our mission statement, like part of that is being self-reliant. So it gives those kids opportunity in a safe environment to be able to be a little bit independent and kind of have some of those experiences that not every boarding school environment creates. And so I really like that element to it. It is a beautiful space, and the town is so small that we know all the people in town. So even
Right.
though they don't work at the school, we have
Pretty
great
safe.
connections with them. And if something bad happens, we hear about it, and something good happens, we hear about it too. So it's a great relationship that the town and the school have, which I think helps enhance their experience at Kent.
Yep. And I know in conversations with Amy Ober, your director of
Yeah.
admission, like seeing that um I know for you guys, like a lot of schools, but you've also done a great job of this idea of geographic diversity, and you've got kids from all over the
Mm.
country and all over the world. Are you, and I feel like this was with my client base now too, like are
Yeah.
you seeing that with hockey players now too? Like the range of like are you
Yeah.
getting and starting to see kids from all over
Yeah.
the place?
I'll tell you, I actually think it's something we've done for a while here
Yeah,
from a
I
hockey
agree.
perspective, because we've kind of had to. Like, you know, like Avon has the reputation that Avon
Right.
has. Salisbury's been really, really good. Like, if we wanted to compete on that level, in this market, it's been challenging, right? Because there's so many people that are after the same kids, right? And so I think back to the team we had, I think it was 4 years ago, we won the large school championship. That team had 24 players on it, and we were from 17 different states and provinces.
Jeez.
So it was like turnover every stone. And that's something that we've kind of, it's great to have resources of people like yourself and others
Yeah,
that help introduce us to kids that because we only have the ability we have to see who we can and when we can, but we do a lot to try to turn over every possible stone. We definitely have our areas where I would consider like more pipelines. Like we certainly do well in like the Southern New York area and Westchester, and
right.
then having grown up in the Atlantic District and stayed involved with USA Hockey in that area, that's certainly a strong area for us as well. But we definitely take pride in having kids from all over the place and being able to kind of find kids in unusual places. So it's that's certainly something we think about and are intentional about.
Yeah, and I've seen what's interesting is in I think a lot of those like non-traditional markets, right? Like I have
Yeah.
kids from Texas and
Yep.
Florida and California and Oklahoma, like all of
Yeah.
those places. What I'm seeing now, which in some ways, like initially, I didn't think was going to be the case, and almost sounds counterintuitive. Like I think the rise of all of these hockey academy programs and online and different markets in
Yeah.
some ways, honestly, what I'm seeing is I think those programs have helped make boarding schools in some ways a lot of times more attractive, and that I'm seeing more and more kids or families who maybe are spending a year in that experience and recognizing like, hey, this maybe this isn't providing the whole experience that we're looking
Mm.
for, right? Like what
Yeah.
maybe the hockey's pretty good, but the academic or the social piece is lacking. And so
Sure.
I think that that has, the right, not only like how important hockey is in some of those places, but also like
Yeah.
the opportunities are so limited and academically in a lot of those places playing good hockey and getting a good education is so limited that like boarding
Yeah.
schools are like this beacon now to these families. They're like, hey, we
Yeah.
got to go.
100%. And like, as you described, like I think academies are really good at what they do. And if that's
Yeah,
what you're looking for, then that's the right thing for you. Like, I think there was a lot of fear amongst a lot of the prep coaches about academies and how that's going to impact, our potential kids that we can recruit from. I've never felt that way because I feel like
yeah,
if
I
you're a
agree.
kid that fits at one of those places, then you don't fit with us anyway because your value, and not that it's a bad thing, but your value
Right.
system and what you're looking for is not what we offer anyway. So even if you did end up here, it probably wouldn't have been a good fit. So there are enough families out there who value those other things you mentioned, the educational experience, the social experience, that can be married with high level hockey that, there's a lot of really good hockey players out there. And if we can find the ones that match our goals and our kind of mission and are mission appropriate to Kent, then those are the kids that are going to thrive here anyway. And so to the other point, I think a lot of hockey growing in some of those non-traditional markets has been hugely beneficial to us because they get to a point where there is some high level development in players, but not enough in terms of
Right.
depth where they need to find, they're either traveling so much that it's completely overbearing on their family or they need to find a different solution. And so I think that actually has been beneficial to us seeing the growth of hockey in areas where it hasn't always been as strong to have kids that maybe 10 years ago wouldn't have been, or to call it 15 years ago, wouldn't have been able to compete at our level. Well, now they're able to compete at our level, but there's not enough kids in their area that can compete at our level. So they need to find that next step. So
Yeah. The thing in there you mentioned that jumps out to me too about Kent is that idea of like, mission appropriate kids. And I
yeah,
feel like where what I've always like, love working with your admission office and talking to you about is that I think you guys do that really well and really intentionally. So, like, in
Mhm.
some ways, the challenge for me, right, is when I'm talking to families and that question of like, okay, is he or she, like with some of my girls too, like, are they going to
Sure.
be admissible at Kent? Um, the challenge for me is that, like, obviously there's some kids who, like, well, academically, I know that they would be successful there. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the right fit. And then
Sure.
conversely, I've also had some kids who, like, hey, you know, academically, maybe they haven't found the highest level of success that they could in that environment, but in an
Yep.
environment like Kent, they will. Um,
Yeah.
and I think you guys do a really good job of sorting through what is a very large and competitive applicant pool to find
Yep.
those kids. And I know, obviously, from a hockey standpoint, you're involved in it. So
Yep.
I don't know if there's a question in there other than being
Yeah,
like a
no,
statement
I do have
around,
some
like,
thoughts on it though.
yeah,
Like, I think you hit it on the head. Like, when people ask me where we fit in the marketplace, the schools we compete with from a hockey perspective, I always say like I don't think there's anybody, again, biased opinion, but I don't think
right.
there's anybody that does the combination of the two things better than we do, right? Hockey and academics, marrying those two things. There's some fantastic schools, there's some fantastic hockey programs, but I feel confident that we deliver as good, if not better, than everybody else at marrying those two things and creating opportunity on both sides of that. And to your point, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Like, when I think of a student that excels at Kent, it's not necessarily the kid that's, academically the most gifted kid. I mean, of course, those kids can do well here. And it's not necessarily, a kid who isn't academically gifted can't do well here. I think it's the kid that is self-motivated, that is willing to self-advocate, that is willing to use the resources that we have on campus because there's a ton of them. We are admittedly not a school that's going to hold a kid's hand. But if you're a kid that is motivated, even if you're not the most academically gifted kid, you can excel here because
Yeah.
there are so many people that want to help and support you, and that would bend over backwards to do so. But we also need you to meet us halfway. We need you to be bought into that too. And so the kids that take their academics seriously and that are motivated can excel here, regardless of kind of where they fit on that academic, natural ability perspective.
Yeah, and I say, and a part of it is like I really do admire Amy Ober and her staff and the job they
Yeah.
they do there. But I do think that, yeah, it's a place where I know in my conversations with, I feel like when I'm talking to you or now Brian, who's helping you and
Mhm.
assisting in the hockey office, like
Yeah.
once I get that sense of like, hey, this is a kid that we think could help our hockey program, then talking with Amy and the admission side, it really does become that question of like, do we think he or she, right? But can he be successful here, right? And
Yeah.
it's answering that question. And I think in some ways that's really different than where at some other schools it's this idea
Sure.
of like, well, these are their grades, these are their test scores. So what they've done in the past is sort of we feel like going to indicate whether or not they're going to be admissible. And I think for you guys, it really is that question of like, hey, we're using their grades and recommendations and maybe test scores to determine whether or not, based on all of that, they can be successful here. And as I've
Yeah.
said, for some kids, that's really easy because they've been successful everywhere they've ever been, and they're going
Sure.
to
Yeah,
probably
sure.
be successful there. But there are
Yeah.
some other kids who I feel like, yeah, like I think they're going to be Kent kids because, as you said, they're going to thrive in that environment.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's the other thing. I actually take pride in the fact that I try and really do not meddle in the admissions process at all because I
Yeah,
want kids that are going to thrive here. And Amy's team is way better at identifying that than me. So I give them a list of like, here are the kids we're interested in that we think would be great fits from a hockey perspective. And then I kind of back away from it. I mean, I can't speak to the way it is at other schools, but I want them to be able to tell me, yeah, you're right. This kid is going to thrive here because one, it's just doing right by the kid. I mean, that's a big part of it. Like, we don't want a kid here who's underwater. And two, it's challenging for everybody. If that student is so out of their depth that they can't manage here, that's not good for the student. It's not good for the people that are working with them. So we want to make sure that the kids that our admissions team feels like are mission appropriate are the kids that are being accepted, not just because they have a hook in some area, whether it's hockey or something else. So I really do take pride in the fact that I trust them as experts to do their work, and I'll just give them the information from a hockey perspective, and they can weigh that however they think it's appropriate.
well, and that point for me is like part of it why I started doing these conversations with coaches, right? Because I think that point people are for when I start working with a family, having to educate them about that, they're shocked, right? And I
Yeah.
start with all of them saying, like, look, this isn't college hockey. Like, just because Dale thinks you're a great hockey player, like
Sure.
that does not mean you're going to get in, right?
Right.
And like to your point, does that is it different at some other schools? Like, yeah, it can be, and there's no doubt that schools are going to manage their admissions processes differently. But I do feel like by and large, for the vast majority of schools, and certainly for the schools that are your peer schools, right?
Mhm.
It's I always tell my families that, like, hey, what I feel like my job is like if I can demonstrate to the admission office why I think you would be a good fit and be admissible there, and I can get kind of that green light, then I'm going to go to the hockey coach and say, like, hey,
Sure.
I think this kid could be admitted. Where do you think he's going to fit in? But if you
Yep.
think it's going to work the other way, like, trust me, it's not. Like,
Yeah.
you telling me you like a kid is maybe helps me start a conversation with Amy Ober, but it doesn't
Sure.
mean that it's gonna change what the decision's gonna be.
Sure. Yep. For sure. Agreed.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
So tell me what's your team look like heading into this season?
Yeah, I'm excited. We've got a really talented group. We didn't graduate a whole lot. We didn't lose a whole lot from last year in terms of like numbers. So we have a couple of new kids in that we're excited about, but we also have a really good strength of returners. I feel like I think I said this kind of earlier in the conversation, like we went into last year with pretty high expectations and a little bit of hype around the team because I felt like the talent level that had come in was really strong. And then I felt like we had an okay year, but we didn't meet our expectations. This year, I feel like there's not much hype around our team, but we have most of the same team back. So I'm
Right.
excited about that. A little bit under
Yep.
the radar, but the same talent level of guys that were in last year that there was a lot of expectations around. So, and I think, I've always said, I say this to kids in the admissions process all the time, there's a transition to the style of play at prep hockey, and it's just a little bit different. I always think of it as like, I think the NCAA and prep have similar styles, and I think like pro junior and AAA have similar
Right.
styles.
Yep.
And most of our kids are coming from AAA. And so that adjustment to being on all the time it takes some kids longer than others. I like to I make the example, like I even feel like, Alex Laferriere came in and I remember after his first game looking at him and him kind of being a little bit wide-eyed. And then after that, he had made the adjustment. I think he was the best player in New England from that game forward. But we
Right.
had lost first game of the season, but I remember that. And some guys it takes a month, some guys it takes a year. And so I think last year we didn't make that adjustment quick enough to expectations of how we need to play. And so certainly some of that on me. But I think that with a year under the belt and the same kind of group back, it could be a really great year for us. I think we've got great depth. I think we've got great depth up front, great depth on the back end, and then goaltender is a little bit of not a question mark for us, but I think how exactly it'll unfold is a little bit of a question mark for us because we
Right.
we graduated both our goaltenders from last year, so it'll be
Yep.
some competition in that area. But I think some really talented kids that see who can kind of take the reins.
And then the next one is the one like all my family, right? Like so going as you think about the fall of what would be
Yeah,
26, like what
yeah,
and I know obviously in this day and age that can all change with decisions
sure,
kids are going to
sure.
make, but like any sense of what your needs are going to be for them.
Yeah, I mean, particularly up front, we'll
Mhm.
we'll have quite a few guys that are departing. With only having graduated, I think it was five guys last year. You can imagine this year's a pretty big turnover. So
Right.
we're going to be looking for some guys that can step in and be an impact right away. I think we'll have good players. We have some really good players who would be back too. But so it's not like the cupboard's bare, but we'll definitely need some guys that can step in and be an impact, most noticeably up front. In goal, I think the goalies will be underclassmen. Like we don't have any seniors who are competing for the goaltending spots. So I think we'll be. I don't know how much need we have there for like a guy to step in and be an impact level player.
Right.
On the back end, we'll have a couple spaces, and we'll probably have three guys who are in our top six who are returning. And then we'll have up front, though, it'll be a pretty good number of guys that we'll need. Probably about six out of our top nine will be spaces that are available.
Yep.
So.
Great. Well, I know I've got some good kids who are coming your way, and there's
Absolutely.
lots of good ones
Absolutely.
out there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, did we miss it anything? I think we covered
I
most of
don't
the
I
bases.
don't think so. It's great catching up with you though. And
No.
yeah, I'm always happy to kind of share information if you have families that just I mean, even if it's not about Kent, I truly believe in this model. If I didn't, I wouldn't keep doing it. I just think that there's very few places left where kids can truly play high level hockey and not do it at the expense of other aspects of their development, right? It's like Minnesota high school and us. It's all that
Right.
exists, right?
Yep.
Otherwise, you're sacrificing somewhere. And so I really believe in that, and I almost feel like a duty to keep that opportunity available to kids. And so I'm always glad to talk to anybody about my thoughts and my views on it. And one of the things I think prep schools don't do well is as a body, is collectively, is promote what we do. Like I think we're
I
good at
agree.
promoting our individual schools, but maybe not as
Yep.
a knapsack athletic body. I think sometimes it goes unnoticed how successful some of our kids are when they're able to kind of move on from here. But to do it with the other components, the academic platform, the character development, the leadership opportunities, and all of that other stuff that comes along with these places, it is something that I take great pride in being able to provide that opportunity to kids. So
Well, and I appreciate like you're always. I feel like there's times where I'm pestering you and Amy over with the amount of kids I
no,
have
never.
coming through, and you guys are always so generous with your time. But I will say I do I love the fact that one of the things I often hear and getting to know you over the years, I've known this to be true, but for my families that come and visit and I don't think you're alone in this, but I think you're a
Sure.
guy who epitomizes that idea of like, you know, thinking of yourself as an educator, right? And like
Sure.
what you're doing is, coaching is one of the ways that you're educating that group of kids at Kent that you're working with. But then, I know, and parents again are often surprised when I tell them this, like, hey, you have to understand that for most of these coaches, their main job is not coaching
Sure.
hockey, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for all of you and you in particular in your role, it's working with and touching the lives and educating all of these other students at Kentwell. And hockey's
Yeah.
just the vehicle you're using for that group of 24 or
Absolutely.
25 boys. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's
So,
it's something, yeah, that we definitely take pride in. It's funny you asked me about, and I don't mean to ramble on, but you
no,
asked me
no.
about kind of the process, like for me coming from Canterbury to here, and was I teaching and all of that. I'll be honest, like when I got that job, I didn't expect to. Like I applied for the job thinking like, hey, this would be a great experience. Maybe I'll get an interview process. But it was really important to the athletic director who hired me that they hire a school person, right? And not
Right.
just, there had been a bunch of NHL scouts, a bunch of college assistant coaches who had applied for the job. And, I think when it really came down to it, it was really two people who had been assistant coaches at prep schools who they kind of considered for the job, me and one other guy. And, I was kind of surprised to get the job at the young age that I was, but I think that was a big part of it, that the school valued the fact that they wanted a school person. They wanted somebody who understood what these environments were about and had at the forefront of their mind these young men's development and what we're really here about. So
Yeah. Great, man. Well, I appreciate it. Are you
yeah,
running around
absolutely.
to any rinks this weekend?
I don't know about this weekend. Well, maybe rinks, but maybe with my 8 and 6 year old
There you
at
go.
Mike games. But we've been around the rinks quite a bit, and Brian's out on the road right now, doing some admissions travel too. So he's marrying some of that with some hockey stuff. So to your point of non-traditional hockey markets, I think he was in Nashville this week at some point, and
Nice.
met with some hockey players down there too. So yeah, but we try to get out as much as we possibly can and see as many kids as we can. But it's as you know, it's a pretty wide array of kids, schedules and things like that. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. I
yeah,
appreciate it. We'll
absolutely.
we'll
Thank you,
talk again
Brett.
soon.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.